Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today is July 21st, and even though it does not feel like fall, it has not felt like fall in quite some time, it is still time to start thinking about the fall garden. Today we are going to do the first planting for the 2025 fall garden. We have a big variety of tasks to get to today to start the fall garden. The first one is going to be clearing out this garden bed here. Now this half of the bed with the tomatoes is going to stay. Here I have all my sprouting broccoli from the spring and early summer harvest. This has all gone to seed. I'm not planning on saving seeds from it this year, so we need to go ahead and pull this up. Also, all the lettuce that I had growing between it has bolted. I'm not planning on saving seeds from this either, so this all needs to come out. So even though these plants are done, I don't want to pull them up by the roots. I want to leave the roots in the soil to decompose in the soil because that's going to improve the aeration of the soil and also increase the organic matter in the soil. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my clippers and I'm going to cut all of these plants off at the base, and then I'm just going to throw all the plants in my compost pile. I should mention there are actually 3 varieties of sprouting broccoli in this bed here. 2 of the varieties are done and I'm going to go ahead and pull those out. The 3rd variety in the middle is called purple sprouting broccoli. That broccoli has not yielded anything. Now when I first planted that broccoli, I found some conflicting information. And some of the sources that I found said that the best way to grow that broccoli is to plant it in the fall, allow it to overwinter, and then it will yield in the spring. I don't know, I'm in zone 6, and I think that information is intended for zone 7 and warmer, so I'm not sure if that broccoli will survive the winter here, but because it hasn't yielded yet, I'm going to leave that variety alone in the garden, and we're going to see what happens. The worst thing that happens is it will be killed by the winter. I won't get a yield from it, but I definitely won't get a yield from it if I pull it out. So I'm just going to pull out the other 2 varieties. That will give me plenty of space to plant. In this section here, I'm planning to plant winter lettuce or fall lettuce here. A little early for winter lettuce, but we'll be planting some fall lettuce in the place of the broccoli. Leaving that 1 variety of broccoli in this bed will still give me plenty of space for that. So all of the lettuce and the sprouting broccolis that are done are ripped out. You can see this is what we have left. I did have a few onions in here which got completely shaded out, and as you can see didn't really do anything. I'm going to leave those because I'll harvest these as scallions at some point. And these are the sprouting broccolis I mentioned, which I'm going to leave to see if they yield in the spring. Now because I had plants that already grew in this soil this year, I do want to amend the soil to replace any nutrients that were already taken by the plants that grew here. So I'm just going to go grab some fresh compost and top off this bed with a layer of compost. Now, I do recognize that I have wood chips in this compost that I had used as mulch for my sprouting broccoli. They are broken down wood chips. They're about 2 years old, almost 2 years old. But that being said, burying them in the compost may not be the smartest idea because that may end up tying up nitrogen in the soil to break down the wood chips. If that is the case, then the lettuce that I'm planting here will suffer. But I'm just gonna do an experiment and I'm gonna see. I'm not sure if it'll make a difference or not, but I am going into this knowing that that's a possibility. I just don't really want to go through the effort of removing all of these wood chips, scraping them off, and then amending. So I'm just gonna leave them and we'll see what happens. So now that I have my bed all prepared for planting, I'm just going to go through my lettuce seeds and I'm going to pick out some varieties that are a little more cold tolerant. Now, given the fact that it is late July, cold tolerant may seem like an interesting choice, but I am planning on this lettuce lasting as long into the season as possible. So I'm planning on planting it now. It should be ready to harvest starting sometime. Now it depends on how mature you want to let it get. You can harvest it much earlier than this, but I'm trying to let this lettuce get fairly mature and I'm planning to begin harvesting it sometime in September. So at that point, we could be starting to get some cooler nights, and at that point the lettuce should be pretty much past the danger of bolting, and it should last in this bed as long as I can keep it going, basically until it gets too cold for it. So I am going to plant some cool tolerant varieties. I am going to make a note of what I plant here because if the summer ends up being long and hot, planting cool tolerant varieties may not have turned out to be, it may not give me the best results. But I'm kind of, when it comes to the fall garden, it can be a little bit challenging because we never really know, at least in my area, how the end of summer, the early fall, that whole transition time is going to go. It's very different year to year. So I'm going to plant cool weather lettuce varieties in this bed. That may end up being a mistake, but that's what I'm going to do for today. This is both cool and heat tolerant, so this is a great choice. So I'm definitely going to plant some of this. And then, let's see, I'll plant some butter crunch because that always does well for me. Oops. Let's see what else we have here. You know, I'll try some black-seeded Simpson. I don't know that that's really going to do well this time of year, but we'll experiment. We'll see how it does. And then winter density. This is one of my favorite lettuces for winter. This one, I'm going to make sure that I save enough seeds so that I have enough to do a second planting later in the fall in case this first planting doesn't take. And then this tango lettuce as well. I'm going to do the same with that. We'll plant some of this now, and I'll make sure I have enough to do a second planting later. So I'm going to plant my fall lettuce the same way that I plant my spring lettuce. We just make a little furrow. Then I'm going to sprinkle the seed pretty thickly down this furrow. So I'm just going to continue planting all the lettuce varieties nice and thickly like that. I like to plant the lettuce thickly because it allows for a nice dense carpet of lettuce to grow. And then I like to harvest using the cut and come again method. Basically, I just take scissors and clip down the line of lettuce, harvest it, but I leave a couple inches of plant behind, and that plant will regrow and provide me with subsequent harvests. The other reason, specifically this time of year, that I like to plant the lettuce thickly, when it is hot like it is now, lettuce tends to be a little bit more finicky about germinating. So by planting the seeds nice and thickly, I'm giving myself a better chance of success, a better chance that more of my seeds will germinate. So I got this half of the bed all planted out with lettuce. Let's head on into the main garden where we're going to plant our next fall crop. So here we're in the main garden area where I attempted to grow potatoes this year. Not really sure how successful I was, but at some point soon I will pull up some plants and we'll find out. But today we're concerned with the fall garden. And so against this fence here, I'm going to plant my fall crop of peas. Now you can see there are some plants growing that I did not plant here. We've got some wild maple trees and all kinds of plants. So I'm going to go ahead and clip those out. I'm just going to plant a row of peas along the fence here. I've never planted peas in this spot before, so it'll be an experiment and we'll see how it does. I got the peas planted against this fence. Now, while it is probably considered a little bit early to be starting fall peas in my area, I have found that a lot of times when I start fall peas at the recommended time, I don't have enough time to get a harvest. So I tend to start them earlier than the actual recommendations say. So hopefully starting these peas at the end of July will be the trick for fall peas. Now, because I started them a little bit early, I may do a second planting of peas again in maybe a week or two. So this probably will not be, I didn't plant a very large section of peas, but I did want to get some in a little bit on the early side, and then I'll probably plant some in about 2 weeks to kind of, hedge my bets a little bit, and hopefully we'll get an extended crop of fall peas. Now, through here, this area is ready to plant. I'm actually not going to plant this today. This is going to be set aside for fall and winter lettuces and other greens, but I'm going to wait a little bit so I can kind of stagger my harvest. Over here, this area I did recently plant with lettuce. You can see some of them are starting to come up. I do actually need to water this a little bit to hopefully help the rest of these lettuces sprout, but this area is planted here. Now behind me, you can see a couple of my brassica beds. These are not ready to take out yet because I'm still getting a harvest from both of these. So what I'm actually going to do with my brassicas, I'm not going to direct sow them. I actually find that I have better success when I start them in pots and transplant them out later anyway. So I'm going to keep my brassicas growing in these beds here. And we're going to head back over to the side yard garden. And I'm going to start some seeds in pots to replace these brassicas when they come out. So brassicas are a really important part of the fall garden. Brassicas are a family of plants that includes broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, a lot of those cool weather plants that we really love and are familiar with. So in the fall garden, I'm not going to plant as big of a variety of these as I did in my spring garden. I'm just going to focus on a few of the tried and true reliable favorites. Some of them, like when it comes to kale, I probably will start some kale. I do find, however, many people don't have this experience. It's just the experience that I've had. I do find that a lot of times my fall kale takes a while to get going, and my kale that I planted in the spring ends up lasting all the way till fall anyway. So sometimes I don't even really end up using the fall kale. What I do find with the fall kale that is useful is that often it will overwinter, and then in the spring it will start growing really early because it already has an established root system and it's already acclimated to that soil. So it'll start growing really early and give me a really early harvest. Of course, at that point it is getting ready to bolt and go to seed, so I have a short window of harvest. But it can give me a really nice early harvest before that year's kale really starts to take off. So for that reason, I do still like to plant some fall kale. So I will plant some of that. We'll be planting some broccolis. I'm planning to plant both traditional heading broccoli or regular heading broccoli and some sprouting broccoli as well. And I'm trying to decide about, I think I will plant a couple cauliflower plants, not a real lot. Broccoli, one of the nice things about broccoli is that depending on the variety that you grow, often once you harvest the main head, that head will continue to produce side shoots for you. And sometimes in the fall, if you get a good fall weather, good fall weather that really agrees with broccoli, you can get a really extended harvest of those side shoots, and that can be really nice. Cauliflower doesn't do that though. At least there aren't any varieties that I'm familiar with that produce side shoots. If you have grown a variety of cauliflower that produces side shoots, definitely let me know, because that's something that I really need to know. But I have not had the experience of cauliflower producing side shoots. So generally when cauliflower, once it produces its main head, I go ahead and pull it out of the garden because, as I said, it's been my experience that it does not produce side shoots after the main head. So I may grow a couple plants of cauliflower, but I think my main focus will be broccoli. And then I'm going to plant some cabbage plants as well. So as you can see, here's my really fancy, elaborate, not really, setup where I'm going to be growing these brassicas. I did mention before that I have had better success starting these types of plants in a situation like this rather than direct sowing in the garden. As long as the weather isn't too hot, I do like to start these plants outside. So I'll start them down here and then I'll put them out on my deck. And that way I have easy access to them to monitor them from inside. If the weather is really hot in your area, these types of plants may do better if you start them inside your house in a more climate-controlled environment. It has, I'm in Connecticut where it's not as hot as it is in some places. Right now, we have a little bit of a stretch of cooler weather, although I think next week it is actually, or probably actually even the end of this week, it is actually supposed to heat up again. So I'm going to keep an eye on the weather, and I may end up bringing these plants inside, but I do like to start them outside if possible, because it saves me from the hardening off process. While I do have to water them more frequently outside, I do find that they dry out more quickly with the sun and the heat on them. I find that it's, in my mind, for me, it's worth it. That's a worthy trade-off, because I don't want to have to deal with the hardening off process again at this point in the season. So let's pick out some varieties here. Definitely going to plant some asperbrock. I think this will probably be the only sprouting broccoli I plant this fall. Maybe I'll start a couple of these too. And, okay, fine. We'll just start all three of these. I'm going to think about cauliflower. And then Eastern Magic, I think, will be the only broccoli variety that I'm going to start. Eastern Magic is my most reliable broccoli variety that I grow. Although I wonder if I should maybe grow some of these other varieties. They may do better for fall. I'm not sure. I think I'm just going to stick with the Eastern Magic. I'll let you know what I decide to do about cauliflower. And cabbage, I have three main varieties. Three varieties that I've grown in my summer garden. I'll probably just start a couple of each of these. We have Early Jersey Wakefield, Red Acre Cabbage, and Savoy Perfection Cabbage. Additionally, I'm not going to start this today, I do have some kohlrabis. These I would probably direct sow. I don't have a lot of experience growing kohlrabi. If you do have experience with it, let me know your experience. These are fairly quick maturing. For example, I have the white Vienna here, which says 55 to 60 days. And because this can tolerate a little bit of a frost, I don't have to rush to get this in to, to have completed its growing cycle before mid-October, which is when my first frost usually is. So I will probably hold off a few weeks and I may start some of these directly in the garden. Now, as far as kale, I will probably start some scarlet kale, some Russian red kale, and blue curled Scotch. The other variety that I really like to grow is dazzling blue kale. This is a lacinato variety. I find in my experience, although this is supposed to be pretty cold tolerant, in my experience the other varieties are more cold tolerant, but I may throw a couple of these in the ground or in the plants too, and we'll see what happens. In the pots is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to start these seeds just like I did in the spring. Just make a little divot in each pot and plant the seeds about a 1/4 inch deep. So when it comes to how to plant certain varieties of seeds, you should be able to find most of the information that you need on your seed packet. When it comes to these types of plants, brassica plants, you want to plant them approximately a 1/4 inch or so deep. Just follow the instructions on your seed packet. And the most challenging thing I find with planting seeds outside this time of year, because it's so warm, is keeping the soil moist. Seeds, it's really important that the soil be kept moist while they're germinating, and because it's so hot out right now, whether you're planting in pots or in the ground, I find that seeds can dry out very quickly this time of year. So the flip side of that is that they do also germinate much more quickly when it's warm like this, so you won't have to at least keep them moisturized for that long. So we've got all of our pots planted. Now we just need to wait for these to germinate, take good care of them as they grow, and transplant them out into the garden in a couple weeks. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today while we got started planting the fall garden. There will be more plantings to come. This was just the beginning, but I can't wait for these plants to germinate and grow and to share the progress with you. Let me know what you're planting for the fall garden. What have you grown? What have you had success with? And what are you trying this year for the first time? I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.